Hello and welcome to the final part of my Ahsoka Tano cosplay build for her Season 7 outfit. I'll be walking you through how I made her headband, arm cuffs, and belt. However, just as a side note, I did not create her boot covers, so keep that in mind. I'll also show you how I made her tunic, and while it doesn't completely hold up to my standards, there were a few things I learned while making it that I think are worth sharing. So let's get started with the armor. I always start with making a paper pattern, and I use newsprint paper to do this because you can buy it in huge pads at any craft store. Oftentimes, I'll eyeball all of my measurements and I'll draw them out larger than they need to be so I can make adjustments. Once I have those adjustments made, I will assemble all of the pieces and try it on and see if it fits. For this project, I bought 4mm black EVA foam on a roll off of Amazon. Here you can see me testing out my headband on my mannequin head, which I named Tilda.
Bonjour.
When I first cut out all of my foam pieces, they were all curled up because they were on a roll, so I fixed that by applying heat with a heat gun. For my belt buckle, I used 2 layers of this blue foam I found in my craft box. I think it's probably around 6mm thick. Later, I beveled this with my Dremel. And here are all of the pieces after using the heat gun on them. As you can see, the hip plates are a little bit more dimensional now, and some of the other pieces lie flat. I then added some raised details by cutting smaller pieces of foam and puzzling them around the edges. In retrospect, I probably should have cut 2 of each piece out and then cut out the center of one of those pieces so I wouldn't end up with all of those seams. Whenever I do end up with unwanted seams, I use DAP Quick Seal to fill those in. And once those areas are Dremeled over, you can barely see them. Here are all my pieces ready to be coated with Plastidip. Sealing your foam before painting is an important step as some paints can actually eat away at foam. Just be careful that you read the warning labels and use these products in a well-ventilated area. This project was my very first time using Plastidip, so I made a few drips, but that was okay. Then every piece was coated in a layer of black acrylic paint. Once that dried, I added my first layer of metallic silver paint, which was the Lumiere brand I bought off of Amazon. For a paint that was just brushed on with an old brush, I think this turned out pretty well, although I know that there are much better methods for applying metallic paints and paints in general for your cosplay projects if you want them to turn out looking smoother. To add a bit of weathering, I mixed my own gray paint with black and white acrylics. I applied it to the places that, in my reference photos, looked darker, or places where I thought needed a little bit of weathering or dimension. When I was finished, the gray paint looked a little bit harsh, so I went over everything again with a metallic paint, which was a little bit see-through so you could still see the areas I had darkened. For the back of the hip plates and the arm bands, I mixed my own blue color that just matched the references I had. Then I wanted all of my designs to be symmetrical, so I made myself some templates that I just mirrored and I traced them out with a pencil. I used the same gray paint that I had used previously for the designs. Instead of using barge cement for the hip plates, I used hot glue. And that little black piece you see in the middle of the belt is what I used to attach the little dangly part that hangs in the back of the belt. It's faux leather that I had lying around, but that wasn't the best option because it's slick, so it's hard to glue things to. So I recommend using maybe cotton fabric or something with a little bit more grip. Now this step probably isn't necessary, but I decided I was gonna go in the back of my belt with more hot glue. In order to wear the arm cuffs, I had to make 2 straps using elastic and Velcro. When I got to this step, I was being a little bit impatient, so I didn't make sure that the Velcro was really stuck onto the elastic. They ended up falling off, and in the process, they tore up the elastic. So later, I went in for repairs, and I ended up solving this problem by just sewing on the Velcro. The little square you see in the center is used to keep it from flopping off of my glove. I found these blue fingerless gloves off of, you guessed it, Amazon, and all I had to do was shorten them a bit. Here's my headband with the bike reflectors, and this attaches to my headpiece with Velcro. Now they've creased a little bit, but that's because I'm sad and I keep my stuff in bags and they get messed up, so don't do that. My belt buckle was hot glued onto the belt, and on the opposite side it attaches with Velcro. The 3 smaller middle plates are connected with elastic that was hot glued. Before I start telling y'all how I made my tunic, I just wanted to pop on here and tell you that I have a Ko-fi account. Ko-fi is a site where creatives like me can fund their projects. On my page, donations are not expensive and I really don't expect anything from anyone. But if you want to, quote unquote, buy me a blue milk, then your kind donation will go toward my next cosplay projects and I will share all of the behind the scenes with you guys. So if you've enjoyed seeing my work on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram, you can leave me a donation, but if you can't contribute monetarily, your support in the comment section and by sharing my content is so valuable to me. So thank you all for your support so far and for your continued support through my journey. I thought it would be a cheaper and potentially easier option to buy a pre-made dress on Amazon and remake it. So I found this dress that was the right color, a 4-way stretch fabric, and had elastic bunching on the sides that could be taken out so that it would be a good length. It was actually longer than I needed it to be so that I could take the extra fabric and create a collar from it. Here's the dress with the excess fabric trimmed off. I changed the shape of the bottom of the dress and I also fit it to my body by putting it on inside out, pinning it, and then sewing along those lines. Ahsoka's tunic has a bit of a cap sleeve, so I also had to create those. After several attempts for the collar and the cap sleeves, this is what I came up with. For some reason, I decided I wasn't gonna use a pattern for this dress, and I wasn't even going to make up a pattern for the collar, which was probably a mistake. And on top of that, I did not add a zipper, so I have this dress that is a pullover dress with a small collar, and this is where you can see the problems start to develop.
This is where the fun begins.
So this part of making the tunic is the only part that I hold dear in my heart because it was the only part that didn't cause me problems. I drew on the designs with chalk and then I freehand painted them. Remember the Lumiere paint I used for my armor? That's the same paint I used for my tunic because it's also a fabric paint. When looking through reference photos for Ahsoka's tunic, I realized that the lines don't always appear silver. Sometimes they looked a little bit gold, so I decided to use mostly silver but add a little bit of gold paint, and that helped add that same kind of effect. I actually love the way that this paint looks on the fabric, but the only problem is anytime I try to put it on, it cracks because it's on a 4-way stretch fabric with no zipper. So my recommendation is get a pattern or make a pattern, use a non-stretch fabric, and use a zipper. So that is it for my Ahsoka Tano cosplay build. Thank you all for your support and patience during this process. As always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I will try my best to get back to them as soon as possible.